Welcome, everyone, to my talk. I think this might be the 30th. Undiscovered Latium, which we're going to view with humor as we see humorous quirks in the medieval Majesty. We're going to the region of Latium, which is south of Umbria. It is the region where, of course, Rome is located, and it is the area of Tuscia, and we'll be talking about Tuscia tonight. Tuscia is a territory which the name will come into being about the time of the Roman conquest of the Etruscan area. This was a strong Etruscan settlement. Etruscan as of about 600 to 800 BC. When the Romans move in the 3rd century BC, the area is called Tuscia. Tuscia, as you can see, is located between Tuscany and Latium. It's an undiscovered territory. Why? Well, just to the north of it is the well-known Tuscany. Just to the south of it is the well-beloved Rome. But tonight we're going to see why you'll want to be heading soon to the wonderful region of Tuscia. We're seeing 3 of the hill towns in this talk. I would have liked to talk about more of them, but we want to do a bit at a time. We're seeing Montefiascone on Lake Bolsena, Marta right on Lake Bolsena. Let us remember, I did a talk on Bolsena, but for those of you who weren't there, Lake Bolsena is the largest volcanic lake in Europe. My geologist son tells me it was probably a volcano as of 700,000 years ago, blew its top in about 300,000 BC. The spray of volcanic rock and so forth creates the Tuffo Plateau on which Orvieto is perched. We're also going to visit the town of Tuscania. All 3 of these towns, due to their proximity to this volcanic lake, are made of volcanic stone, almost all of their glorious medieval buildings. Let us start in Tuscania. It's right on the shore of Lake Bolsena. For many historians and archaeologists, it was the site of Fanum Voltumne, the important Etruscan sanctuary. Fanum Voltumne means sanctuary of Voltumna, and Voltumna was one of the most important of the Etruscan deities. Fanum Voltumne was the site where the Dodecapoli, the federation of the 12 Etruscan city-states, met annually to discuss political issues and to worship their specifically adored deities. So it's interesting to think that buildings like the Duomo of Montefiascone, which you see in this photo, the huge dome you can see on it, these are sites which are religious sites now, but they were religious sites in 600 to 800 BC when the Etruscans had temples there. And when the ruins of the Etruscan temples, the Romans built their temples. And then the Longobards come into this area in the 6th century AD, and much of the many of the Roman edifices are destroyed. They're later be rebuilt. So this is a continual recycling also of building materials, as we're going to see. Here we have another beautiful view of Montefiascone. You can see it on Lake Bolsena. Out there in the lake is one of the islands. We can see that one is Isola Martana. And according to George Dennis, who's a 19th century British explorer, Fanum Voltumne was Montefiascone. This is up for discussion. Some people believe that this important Etruscan sanctuary was in Orvieto. For others, it was in Viterbo, but not for George Dennis. It was Montefiascone. We're going to talk today about an extraordinary church of Montefiascone. It is called San Faviano, named after a Roman martyr. And we're going to see an image of him inside the church in a fresco and talk more about San Faviano. The church, roughly, the architecture we're seeing is 11th to 12th century with additions. In the 15th century, there was one major nave. In the 15th century, they added 2 side naves. In the 16th century, they added the loggia. From that loggia, the popes could bless the people below. This is an important city for the popes. It is thought that as of the 8th century AD, Pope Leo IV declares that in a little church, a sacello, a small sanctuary church called Santa Maria, the remains of the martyr San Faviano should be buried. And his body, therefore, was in this church. Origin, again, perhaps 9th century, but prior to that, a temple, etc., etc. Now, here we see an image of San Faviano. This is a mid-15th century fresco, which is in the church. You can see him dressed in the military garb. He was an important, they say, figure in Rome. And he is holding a flag here, which we also call the Bandiera di San Giorgio, the flag of St. George. As of the 11th century, this flag will become representing the Saint San Giorgio, and it will also become a flag representative of the Crusaders. As of the 11th century, Jerusalem is in the hand of the Turks, and the faithful set out to save Jerusalem. And of course, this is the beginning of the epic of the Crusades. To his right, which would be to our left, is Saint Beloved, to the people venerating her image in this church, Santa Caterina. She was a saint of Alexandria, Egypt, 3rd to 4th century martyr saint. She was drawn and quartered on the wheel. She's holding actually the wheel in her hand. On his left, which would be our right, is Saint Lucy, another martyr saint. She was a martyr saint of Syracuse, which was Greece, in the early Christian period, I believe 4th century as well. Now, what is extraordinary about this church, San Faviano, is it is a 2-level church. As you look at the photo on the right, you can see the lower level, the main nave. On a 2-level church, there were a couple functions here. The lower level was the Battistero or the Martyrium. That is the place for baptisms. The Martyrium would be the place where a saint's bones were buried. And excuse me 1 second, if you could kindly I just want everybody to know this. The internet connection is unstable. So I'd like to let Julia know that as well. But let's hope we're going to keep continuing here. And actually, under that altar were kept the bones of San Faviano. The upper level in a 2-level medieval church was basilica or cathedral. And we see here a papal throne in the photo on the left. That is the throne of Urban IV. And that is his Cattedra Papale, which is papal seat. He orders it built in 1262. He's very proud of his generous help to the people of Montefiascone. He lives for some years in the papal palace. The ruins are still there in Montefiascone of the Rocca Papale. And he bestows many favors, a lot of wealth on the city of Montefiascone, and they actually are very grateful to him. And he has this papal throne built actually to honor himself. You enter the upper church from the back of San Faviano. So here we're seeing the back of the church. The door on the left is the entrance into the upper level, which would be the basilica or cathedral. And as you go in, you see these massive rounded arches and a beautiful ceiling, which is called a cielo capriata. A soffitto capriata. That is of wooden beams. This is an important church because it's very close to the Via Francigena, which is the main pilgrimage route that led from Canterbury, England, down to Rome. And some of the pilgrims would continue on, taking boats from Puglia to the Holy Land. And this church was extremely close to the Via Francigena, and many of the frescoes and so forth in the church were to inspire the pilgrims on the walk along the Via Francigena. And this is the route of the Via Francigena. Starting from Canterbury, England, you could see going through Dover, Calais, going through France, going through cities of Switzerland, Lausanne, you can see there, down through Aosta, Vercelli, Piacenza, passing through Lucca, San Gimignano, Siena. We're all on the route of the Via Francigena, the French road. And you can see it bypasses Viterbo, which is very close to Montefiascone. Actually, it bypasses directly Montefiascone. And when I was recently in the church, I met a young pilgrim. This is Julia. She is from Rome, and she had walked the route from Siena to Montefiascone I think that took her most of the day. She was about to board a train then back to Rome. She was doing a part of the Via Francigena. We were both actually overcome by the beauty of the church, the fascinating sculpture on the columns. I'm going to show you a couple of those close up. And she is looking upwards at the upper level. I had already been in the upper level. She hadn't, and she was about to take the stairs to go to the upper level, the basilica part of the church. Now, over the altar, and this is the altar area, but let me see if I can show you a better photo. Yes, this is the lower main church, the presbytery church. The presbytery of the church is that area over the altar. It is frescoed, and let's zero in on the frescoes. Over the altar is a fresco of Christ blessing. He's flanked by two saints, and below him is an image of San Faviano, Roman martyr saint. This was frescoed in the 15th century. Look at how he's depicted, very much like San Giorgio, on horseback with his sword, with the San Giorgio flag, which would become the flag of the Crusaders, probably done by an unknown, shall we call it, anonymous Tuscan artist. Now let's have a look at these beautiful columns. Look at that sculpting. So here we're seeing the exquisite capitals, again on the left, acanthus leaves. Look at the bunches of grapes sculpted along the top. Beautiful vegetation here on the right as well. Now we're starting to move into some elements of curiosity here. This is an image of a lion. One lion on the left, it's probably the same lion. On the left, he's devouring a Christian. On the right, he's spitting him out. And the lion actually was an important symbol in the Middle Ages, and he symbolized the metamorphosis during the passage through death. And that is because he can devour an individual and then eliminate that individual, thus, when he does, transmitting to that person life-giving strength and power to his victims, in other words. So this metamorphosis of life to death was an important image for the pilgrims to view when they came through this church on their pilgrimage. Isn't that a stunning piece of sculpture? It's not something I have ever seen, not to mention these little tidbits. These are very humorous capitals of columns. I don't know the exact date. We're saying 12th or 13th century, probably sculpted in volcanic rock. And there's inscriptions on the top here. There's an inscription here which goes around the back. And this is a man. He's fingering his beard in a reflective look, and he's sitting perched on an acanthus leaf. And the inscription says in Latin, "Looking at the church, note my beard." In other words, don't just look at everything around you, catch this beard. The other column, a little bit more up the aisle, says, "I am the church custodian, sculpted to make fun of the foolish." And he has no beard there, and he's looking and he's laughing at us up to say, "Were you stupid enough to stop in this church and just reflect on my beard?" So these are just delightful little tidbits in this church of San Faviano. It is a baptismal church, and in one of the side aisles, there's an octagonal baptismal font called per immersionem, that is for full immersion. The baptismal font dates from the 13th century. Behind the baptismal font is a fresco of the 15th century, and you can see here the baptism of Christ in the River Jordan by his cousin John the Baptist. Another delightful fresco in this church, probably done in about 1300, is a Memento Mori, which means in Latin, remember that you must die. Ricordati che devi morire. That's an admonition to the pilgrims and something that they must always reflect on. Lead the good life so that in the next life you find eternal happiness in heaven. Another wonderful fresco in this church, and aren't they full of fascinating sculptures and frescoes? I mean, put Montefiascone on your list in the Church of San Faviano. Psychostasia is the theme of this fresco, which means peso delle anime, the weighing of the scales. This is an unusual image. It's not that typical in medieval churches. It's more typical, actually, of medieval art in French churches in France, actually. The saints to the left of St. Michael the Archangel, we've got to move over here, St. Lucy. We have St. Elizabeth, and I have a question mark after her. We think that is St. Elizabeth. She is a Franciscan tertiary, one of the first lay people to follow the rule of Francis, St. Elizabeth of Hungary. And at the time this was frescoed, probably about the 14th century, 14th, 15th, this was a church of the Franciscans. And then again, St. Lucy, beloved saint. Many frescoes of the saints in this church to be inspirations for the pilgrims. In the contrafacciata, which means the back of the facade. So you're looking at a fresco that you'd see just to the right of the exit. There's a fresco cycle of the stories of the martyrdom of Catherine of Alexandria, as we said, drawn and quartered on the wheel, as you can see to the right. She was a martyr saint of the 3rd to 4th century AD, after Christ, of course. And on the other side of the church, we have frescoes about the life of St. Nicholas of Bari. And St. Nicholas of Bari was actually from the area of present-day Anatolia, Turkey. And he was a saint of the 4th century. And we're going to talk about some of the frescoes related to him. His frescoes are above the tomb, a 12th century tomb of Bishop Johannes De Fuque, who was a German bishop who in 1111, when he died, headed to Rome for the coronation of the Holy Roman Emperor Henry V. Before we talk more about Johannes de Fuque, let us talk about the frescoes of St. Nicholas, Turkish bishop, lived in the 4th century. In the fresco on the left, he's holding a sword. He's saving young people from martyrdom. In the fresco on the right, this is the most famous episode in the life of St. Nicholas of Bari. He's got a ball of gold. That was his inheritance. And he's throwing it in a window for 3 young women who had no dowry and would have been too poor to marry. It's the generosity of St. Nicholas that is stressed, particularly his generosity to the young children. And after all, who is he for us but Santa Claus? He was born in Anatolia, Turkey, but it's said that the relics of St. Nicholas are in the Church of Bari in Puglia, and also some of his remnants, I believe, in Venice. Let's talk about Johannes De Fuque. Now, Johannes De Fuque, on a way to the Rome, and this is his tomb. This is the inscription which is over his tomb. But before I translate this inscription, which you see here, let me tell you the story. He's going to Rome for the coronation of the Holy Roman Emperor. Preceding him is his assistant Martino, and he's very fond of wine. And so he asks Martino, wherever he finds good wine, to write on the wall somewhere or inscribe or leave written, in some permanent way, the word est, meaning this is it. And it's sad that Martino was so overcome with enthusiasm for the white wine of Montefiascone that he wrote, este, este, este. This is it, this is it, this is it. And so when the prelate, the German prelate De Fuque, saw this, he became so enthused over this wine that he drank too much and he died drunk. So the inscription over his tomb says, "Here lies my Lord De Fuque, who died from too much este, este, este." So when you're in the area of Orvieto, of the area of Tuscia, be sure you try this white wine, este, 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 but don't drink too much because you know what can happen. Now we're going to see another medieval wonder. This area is absolutely astounding for its exquisite Romanesque churches. Just look at some of the details of the Romanesque church of Santa Maria Maggiore in the town of Tuscania. And you can see this is a town, it's on a hill, because at the Etruscan time, when the Longobards and so forth invaded, the people moved from the shores of the lake upwards to the hillsides. And this is all built in tough rock, tuffo. This town too, because it's very near Lake Bolsena. So a lot of volcanic material is used in the building. We're going to talk about two extraordinary churches of Tuscany outside the walls. They're on the site of the Etruscan necropolis, where the Etruscan temples were, as early as the 8th century BC, 8th to 6th century BC. Let us remember that the area is Etruscan until the Romans take over in the 3rd century BC. We're talking now about the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore, but we also will be talking about the Basilica di San Pietro. Santa Maria Maggiore, an absolutely splendid example of Romanesque architecture, but it is, if you will, a period of a turnover of architecture. We're moving from the Paleo-Christian basilica to Romanesque architecture. What is a basilica? Let's remember that it does not start as a religious edifice, but it is a Roman building, a huge hall where civic events take place, legislation is decided, and so forth. And so in these churches of Tuscany, we see this transformation of the Paleo Basilica structure into glorious Romanesque architecture. Santa Maria Maggiore documents tell us that there was a church here, some kind of a shrine by the mid-9th century. Also, by the way, San Faviano. Pope Leo IV will mandate the building of a small church dedicated to Santa Maria, Holy Mary, and it will hold the relics of San Faviano. At the same time, mid-9th century, papal mandate will set the building of Santa Maria Maggiore. And then it is restored many times over the centuries, and it is consecrated in 1206. It's also been recently restored. And we're looking here at beautiful combination here of the volcanic rock and stone with exquisite marble. This is all white marble, and we're going to see it in a little bit more detail. This is the entrance, the portal. It has archivolte, we call them archivolts, I guess you'd call them. 3 different vaulted structures creating a great sense of depth. Flanking the door are beautiful statues of St. Peter and St. Paul. Let's have a look. Here we can see St. Peter holding the keys. Here is St. Paul. Look at the exquisite sculpture in marble around these individuals, above them, next to them. This is volcanic rock. We're going to see images also below their feet. Look at the carving above them as well. And let's look below. Their feet are right here, as you can see. Look at this curious figure. This is a man bent over, all crouched, crumpled up, holding onto a vine. I don't know, maybe he's hoping that the vine will give him salvation. I am the vine, you are the branches, etc. The column on the left, the pilaster, we call it on the left, strong Islamic influence. Who are the architects? All we know is they're probably Maestri Comacini, that is from Como, Lombard area, not Longobards, those are the German invaders. But Lombardia is the region of Lake Como, and the sculptural masters were from that area in the Middle Ages. And let's go back to the doorway. We're going to talk about the lunette, the curved arch space over the doorway. And it's quite delightful. This is certainly a piece of spolio taken from another edifice. She's not in the center of this Virgin and Child. She's placed near this image of the sacrifice of Isaac and this image of the Lamb of God. Again, exquisite sculpture. And she just hangs off the stonework, actually, of the lunette. Her feet are hanging, the Christ child's hanging, her garments are hanging off. And above her is the beautiful loggia, made of marble, carved white marble, and nenfro, which is a volcanic rock. By the way, this website, the photo comes from this website. You want to notice that. Medioevo.org. It's a website with many articles on medieval architecture. They will be in Italian. I don't think they have English translations, but you can put in the monuments we're talking about in the search bar and just see the wonderful display of photos they have. This side too, I believe, is from medioevo.org, and I should have actually credited them. You can see the sculpted faces, some bestiary, some human running along the frieze, and the griffins flank the columns, part eagle, part lion, king of the land, king of the sky. Exquisite rose window in Nenfro, which is volcanic stone, combined with white marble. Look at the spokes of that wheel. This is an exquisite Romanesque rose window, rosone, we would call it, I'm just guessing 12th to 13th century. Surrounded by the four evangelists, John's eagle, Matthew's angel, the lion of St. Mark, the oxen of St. Luke. And near the church of Santa Maria Maggiore is a crumbling guard tower, built at the time in the Middle Ages, 11th, 12th, 13th century, when there was warfare among the city-states. And this is a defensive tower, very close to the church, all crumbling now. And this is quite a nice image of the beautiful facade of Santa Maria Maggiore, with the rose window, the griffins flanking the door. This is the Virgin with her feet hanging over the door, and the beautiful sculpting of the columns flanking the doorway. Now let's go in. This is the nave. A magnificent example of Romanesque architecture on the basilica plan. 3 naves, the main nave and side aisle naves. And we're going to talk about the ambone, the beautiful pulpit. We will talk about the ciborium over the altar. And we will talk about this fresco, because this is something else over the altar. And look at these columns. Aren't they exquisite pieces? Probably riempiego, which means using again, or spolio, taken from monuments, because you can see all the pieces. They're kind of put together. Different periods of time, different sites, temple sites, previous medieval churches. And it was scaffolded. I took these photos about 10 days ago. We were there. And again, beautiful sculpting on the capitals of the columns and the scaffolding. I think they're doing work on the vault. The vault has been restored. This is not the original vault, a capriata. Capriata means with wooden beams. This church was very prestigious because it was the Ecclesia Battesimale, the baptismal church. The baptismal font here is also a total immersion font. It's of the 13th century. It's in the right nave. Just to the left of the altar is a Fenestella Confessiones. This is a medieval structure, and it had a little window, and pilgrims could look inside and venerate the remains of the martyr, which would be buried in there. A very unusual structure. It's the first time I've ever seen a Fenestella Confessiones. I didn't know what it was. I had to do research on it. Absolutely fascinating. I want to find out where there's other ones in Italy and try to see them. And this is the ciborium over the altar. The Fenestella was over this way to the left. And we'll try to get a closer view of the ciborium for you. It kind of represents the canopy carried in processions, the ciborio. And here we have the angel Gabriel asking the Virgin to be the mother of God. Beautiful columns, probably Roman columns with carved capitals. A beautiful pluteo, which is a wall or a part of a transept, and this dates from the 8th to 9th century, sculpted white marble. Absolutely exquisite. I wish I had taken a photo of the detail of the sculpture here, but alas, I didn't. The ambone, extremely beautiful, the pulpit of the 13th century on columns with sculpted capitals. All of the ambone was sculpted, an exquisite piece of work by masters of Como area for sure. Maestri Comacini, we call them, the Como masters. And probably the most important sculptural piece in this church is the pulpit. And I want to show it right here, but I want to show it in here. I want to show it to you in detail. This is called Lettorino in Italian, 11th century. We know the artist was Giroldo da Como, So this is a sculptor from the Como area. They probably worked in Tuscany extensively, maybe on their way to commissions in Rome, stopping in the area of Latium here, where their skills were very appreciated and desired. And all this is intricate sculptural work on the ambone. And here you can see again, this is John the Evangelist, the pulpito lettorino. And now we're going to talk about the frescoes over the altar. This is something else. This is called in Italian the giudizio universale. The Italian way to talk about last judgment is to call it the universal judgment, which is quite interesting. The judging of all souls, all people. And in this image, in this 14th century fresco by Tuscan artist, Gregorio Donato d'Arezzo, we have in the mandorla, this is called the mandorla, means an almond, we have Christ, Christ in judgment, or God in judgment, actually. It's Christ in judgment, pardon me, because under him is the crucifix and the instruments of his crucifixion. Look at the angels trumpeting. They're calling the elect to heaven. And these are personages we can recognize. Benedict of Norcia, we can recognize Francisco of Assisi. You can't really see them here. Nobility here, hands folded in prayer, all hoping to reach, of course, heaven. And on the top, in the top row, we have the apostles seated as if to be a court of justice. Now, the delight of this fresco is the devil. And here we have 5 angels. They have forks. These are lances which are forked, and they're sending the evil people to hell. Now, this is something else. These are all people being tortured in hell. There's devils here. This is a little bit of roasting. This person is being given by the devil to Lucifer, and Lucifer will eat them. And get ready for this, everybody. He'll defecate them. And this is called by the Martani, the caca anima. And anima means soul, and I won't translate caca. You can look it up on the net. It means excrement anyway. And so he eats them, he defecates them, and they go into the mouth of a monster. So what could be more hellish than this scene? But it's absolutely a delight to see. You're looking at it, and just really, people in the church with me too, we're all kind of laughing our heads off. So medieval Majesty with humorous quirks, and on we go to the other church of Tuscany, San Pietro. These kids, she's hiding. She's the birthday girl, and they all wanted her to smile, and she said, I'm too shy, so she covered her face. They were having a birthday party, and here I am in the town of Tuscania, and I'd walk down an alleyway and ask them if I could get a photo with them, and I also have a photo of them with the beautiful church of San Pietro in the background and some of the remains of a fortified structure. But let's zero in. There's San Pietro. This is a fortification structure of San Pietro. And the Basilica of San Pietro, with architecture dating from the 8th to the 11th and 12th century, is simply called an architectural milestone by art historians. This is a magnificent example of the transformation of a Paleo-Christian basilica into Romanesque majesty, very near to the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore. And like Santa Maria Maggiore, this is tough rock as well, tuffo, made of volcanic rock and exquisite marble. And probably on the site, like Santa Maria Maggiore, like San Faviano Montefiascone, on a pre-existing Etruscan temple and then a Roman temple. These have always been sacred sites. And like Santa Maria Maggiore, nearby is more than one fortification tower, because in this period, in the Middle Ages, there was city-state warfare, And the towns had these fortification towers for protection. So this is a young couple here. They're reading the history of the church of Montefiascone before they go in. They're near another tower here. And this tower actually borders on the bishop's palace, which was to the right of this church, because until the 15th century, this was the cathedral. I just want to show you this. This is the facade. And again, Archivolte, creating a great sense of three-dimensional perspective, marble, a marble column loggia. And when we were there was an art historian speaking to a group, and she was talking to this group about the facade. And they're absolutely fascinated, as were we. Look at the sculpture here on the beautiful loggia, sculpted in white marble, 12th to 13th century, by these Comacchini masters in stone from northern Italy, the area of Lombardy. This little figure here symbolizes salvation. He seems to be holding up the church. And the columns, absolutely exquisite, all sculpted with different figures. And here's the work of the Comacchini masters. They're noted for cosmatesque, this stone mosaic, which of course the churches of Rome have this stone mosaic as well. This door has all been recently restored, but this is some of the original cosmatesque. And here again, you can see the beauty of the columns. This is a peacock, probably symbolizing everlasting life. And you can see here the three vaults and the great sense of perspection. These figures here, this is all sculpted, and I couldn't get close enough with my camera to take pictures. They're all symbols of the zodiac and so forth, and the seasonal periods of the year. Here we have the loggia, and above the rose window. And the rose window here, surrounded by the symbols of the four evangelists, Matthew's angel, the eagle of John, the lion of St. Mark, and the oxen of St. Luke. And right here is the figure that I showed you before of the man lifting up the window. He seems to be lifting up this bipartite window called a bifore, and he's symbolizing probably salvation. And then you go inside, and it's absolutely astounding. This is something that is overwhelming when you go in because of the exquisite mosaic floor, clearly Romanesque, massive round arches. They're on what we call colonne tozze. Thick, short columns are holding up the arches here. The ceiling has all been redone. This is soffitto capriata, alla capriata, that is with wooden beams. And look at this mosaic work here, leading right up to the altar, covered over with a Cibolium. And there you can see magnificent cosmatesque work done by stonemasons, no doubt from northern Italy, or could have been local people who trained in the work of the northern masters of stonemasonry. These are all different types of stone used to create exquisite mosaics. In the left nave, there were all these Etruscan tombs. And you know that the Etruscan tombs depict the deceased lounging. They're lounging. This one is without a head. I don't know if you can see this one. This is another personage. This was another lounging person. And I looked at them, and it just seemed to me that they were kind of looking at the floor and admiring it as they lounged there. These are Etruscan tombs, could be from the 3rd to 2nd century BC. Again, exquisite columns, di spoglio, that is reused from pre-existing structures. The columns probably, but the sculpting was probably done for this particular church. In the vault, we have an image of San Pietro, St. Peter, first Pope, and this is a basilica, which is a papal church. An 11th century Ciborium or Ciborium over the altar, like a canopy. And then what's amazing about this church is, let me just show you where it is. After you've seen the altar, you head over this way and you go down steps and you go into the crypt. So here's again the nave, altar, entrance to the crypt over here. And these people were preceding me into this stunning crypt. 28 columns recycled from Roman edifices, creating 9 naves. Absolutely stunning. I don't know, I must have been down there at least a half an hour, because every single capital of every single column was a feast for the eye. Now, this one here I've just zoomed in on, and you can see this is Roman, this is medieval, but this is Roman. The columns are all Roman. The sculpting is probably medieval. But some of the sculpting is also Roman, where you see Ionic columns, they're Roman. Look at how they're put together, all different sizes, patchwork. And that crypt is holding the church up, and it survived many an earthquake. So they certainly knew how to build in spite of using recycled materials. Now, this medieval crypt has been the scene of many a great film. Scenes of Romeo and Juliet were filmed in there by Zeffirelli. Pasolini filmed in that church. And Liliana Cavani filmed in that church, her great film, 1989. Don't miss it. Check it out. It's called Francesco, about Francis of Assisi. And playing Francis of Assisi was Mickey Rourke. There he is, denying his earthly possessions in front of the bishop. And they're in the crypt of San Pietro in Tuscany. There's Liliana Cavani on the set with him. This is from her website, cavani.org. And what could be a better setting for a medieval church than this splendor? You see, you couldn't have filmed Francesco of Assisi in Assisi because the Basilica of St. Francis was built after he lived. This was built before Francis of Assisi lived. So much of the filming was done actually in the city of Tuscany. Now, we must go to the city of Marta on the shores of Lake Bolsena for the celebration of their blessed Madonna. She's called La Santissima Madonna Del Monte, Our Lady of the Mountain. Hats off to her. And the hats are off to her all the time during the festival. So this is the town of Marta, another gem. It's on the shores of Lake Bolsena. Right across from Marta is an island called Isola Martana. The name Marta might come from the Phoenician Marath. There's a lot of legends about its founding. One legend even says that it was founded by the great-grandson of Noah by the Phoenicians. Whatever, it was certainly an important Etruscan city in the 6th to 3rd century BC. Then it becomes Roman in the 3rd century, about 280, it's Roman. It's a very important Roman city because it's right near a crossroads of a main thoroughfare. The Via Claudia, I believe, is built in the 2nd century BC, gives greater importance to the city of Marta. And in fact, by 90 BC, it is declared a Roman municipium, a Roman city. It's and the people are cives Romanes, Roman citizens. This is a tower, and it is called the Tower of the Clock, La Torre dell'Orologio. We'll talk about it more. It's also famous for a pope who over-imbibed, and not like Johannes De Fuque over-imbibed in wine. Martinus IV was put in purgatory in Dante. I think it's the 25th canto, but I'm not quite sure. He died of gluttony. He was gluttonous for the eels caught on the Marta River. This is a canara. This is an old trap to catch fish and to catch eels as they head to the river on the Marta River of Marta. And Martin IV loved the eels of Bolsena, one of his favorite foods, and he especially loved them doused and cooked he cooked them himself, I think, in the Vernaccia wine. And he threw a banquet, he overate, he died of indigestion. And I believe he died in the city of Perugia. He's certainly buried in Perugia. He's one of 3 popes buried in Perugia. You may remember from my Perugia talk, 5 popes were elected there, 3 are buried there, and he's one of them. Martin IV, he has made Marta famous. Let's say he's made the Marta eels famous. Marta is an exquisite little town on the lake. You just wander the back alleys and you can see all these narrow alleyways. This was probably one time part of the papal fortress. A lot of the homes are built in the volcanic rock. Again, very narrow alleyways for protection. Some arched over. And one time, a period of probably, or a place of bellicose encounters, not anymore. It gives you just a great sense of peace, this little town of Marta. This is a piece of Rispoglio. I don't know what it would be from. It's a medieval sculpture, and it was used by these people. This is a medieval arch for sure. This is probably a 14th century home, and you can see it's made of volcanic rock. And this was just added to their window. The symbol of the Farnese Pope, Paul III, is here and there in the town. His symbol is the fleur-de-lis because of his family's connection with France. And this is one of the coats of arms of the Farneses at the base of the clock tower, the Torre dell'Orologio, which was once probably part of the tower of the papal fortress. It was probably a lookout tower, and you can see it today. Its origins, it's not as you see now, 13th or 14th century, it was all been restored, but its origins were 13th, 14th century, probably. The little neighborhood right along the water is called Borgo dei Pescatori, which it means the neighborhood of the fishermen. The most important religious edifice in Marta is certainly the Santa Maria al Monte little church. Its origins are lost in time, pre-12th century for sure. We know that at that time, Benedictines were here. They abandoned the church in the 12th century. I don't know for what reasons. Then over time, the church is rebuilt. It is rebuilt and dedicated thanks to the sponsorship of the Farnese family, and the inscription over the door tells us this was sponsored by a certain Pietro Farnese and consecrated in 1485 after restoration. When we went into the church, I went in recently with a friend. It was absolutely beautiful. It was a Saturday, and it was prepared for a wedding. And these beautiful draperies of satin were topped with beautiful bouquets of flowers, and they almost seemed to be an honor to the Virgin over the altar, the beloved Madonna del Monte. But actually, of course, they were going to be honoring the bride and groom. We were there before the wedding. It was absolutely beautiful. And over the altar is the image of the beloved image of La Madonna del Monte. And she's flanked by saints. On her right is John the Baptist holding the scroll, which says, Ecco Agnus Dei, here will come the Lamb of God. He's the precursor. And on her left is St. Peter holding the keys. And look at the beautiful bouquet of flowers all ready for the wedding. This image, I just wanted to put in the Italian phrase here. The origin of this image, we would say, e persa nella notte dei tempi. And I didn't know how to translate it in English, so I thought I'm going to give it to him in Italian. Its origin, that image, lost in the night of time. That means we don't know anything about it. Long, long time ago. The story of the Madonna del Monte is this. It's tied to a delightful legend, medieval. We don't know exactly the period of time. The daughter, and the legend will vary depending on which of the old Martani is telling the story, how their grandmother told them the story, how their great-grandmother told them the story. So there's little twists to how you hear the story. But generally the legend is this. Many, many years ago, a baker's daughter climbed the mountain to get kindling for the baker's oven, for the oven of her father to bake the bread, or her mother. And while she was up there gathering kindling, a beautiful woman appeared to her and said, I would like a church here. She went down the mountain and she told the parish priest, we need a church up here. There's a beautiful woman who asked me to build a church. The priest shrugged off. She tried again a second time. She tried again a third time. Finally, the third time, the priest was curious, and he went with her up the mountain, and he was astounded to see on the face of a rock this image of the Virgin and Child. And he decided the church had to be built, and he wanted it built in Marta. So he had a pair of oxen come up the mountain. They put this rock on the wagon the oxen were pulling. It was a heavy rock, the back of it. This was at the time on a huge rock. The oxen went down the mountain. But interestingly, as they went down the mountain, instead of the load feeling lighter to them, it felt heavier. And they fell down on their knees and they could not go forward. And so they turned the cart around, turned the oxen around, and they went back up the mountain, and the load was lighter for the oxen going up the mountain. So the people knew that the image had to stay in the very site where she appeared to the young girl on the mountain. And they built a church around her, and the church is called La Madonna del Monte, Our Lady of the Mountain. And there she is in her church. Now, the church was consecrated, as I mentioned, in 1485. On May 14th, 1485. And here are the splendid flowers that we saw the Saturday we were there. Look at the flowers in front of the Madonna. All around the church were these elegant flowers to worship the beloved Madonna del Monte. In a side chapel were many ex votos thanking her for favors received. You may remember from my past talk on Deruta, the meaning of ex voto, out of a vow. It's either a thanks for a favor received or a promise to do something if your prayer is answered. They're all inscribed with either GR, grace received, or PGR, per grazia ricevuta. So there's a whole chapel in that church with ex votos to La Madonna del Monte. And then the extraordinary festival takes place on May 14th. It's called La Festa della Madonna Santissima del Monte. In fact, she's not just La Madonna del Monte. She's La Madonna Santissima del Monte. It is a festival which probably rooted in pagan traditions, the time of fecundity, fertility, the regeneration, probably has roots with ancient Roman festivals of fertility, regeneration, rejuvenation. All of you have heard my talks on the Corsa dei Ceri and Gubbio, the Calendimaggine Assisi. You're saying, yeah, we've got that now. Another name for the festa is Festa delle Passate, because at the end of the festa, at the end of the procession, they do 3 passate, which is walks around the Madonna del Monte at the end. The other name of the festival is Barabata, and everybody but Martani can call it a Barabata. I would never call it a Barabata after hearing about it from the Martani. Barabata was the name given to the festival in the 1700s. And at that time, and I think I've got a note here, I want to read this to you. Yes, the parish priest of Capodimonte was very upset by the disorder of confraternity members who were visiting Capodimonte, which is another hill town on Lake Bolsena. And he said, let's see, the Martani abuse their processions. This, by the way, there were processions to the Madonna as of the 1500s. And he said, there is terrible abuse of their privileges in these processions. They're making too much noise. They're creating a lot of chaos, where they're promoting derision of non-residents, of people who are not from Marta, people who come to see the processions. It's almost as if they've come to seek out Barabba. So, in offense, the people who are not from Marta call it a Barabata, a celebration of Barabba, who is, of course, the bad thief. Now, in this celebration, there are participation in the people of all ages. And the celebration was first, a celebration tour was first mandated by Pope Leo IV in the 9th century, although already there was a small procession. Although the official birth of this festival is the late 16th century. And as of the 17th century, the following categories participated in this procession. All taking place in this procession are the Kazenge, those that trusted with guardianship of land holdings, the Bifolchi, those who worked the land with oxen, the Villani, peasant farmers and their various groups, those who thresh, those who scythe, those who prune olive trees, those who prune vineyards. And then there are the fishermen, and that category was added in the 17th century. They prepare their floats, which they call fontane, because there's generally water on them somewhere, for months before. And they never, ever use a float the following year. This is one of the floats. Her image is in the center. And as they walk through, this is a group of villani. These will be peasant farmers. They all shout out many times, "E viva Maria! E viva il Santissimo Sacramento! E viva la Madonna! Long live Mary! Long live the Holy Sacrament! Long live the Madonna!" And their hats are off to the Madonna. There is hats off to the Madonna. These are horsemen, father and son, hats off to the Madonna. And they come through the streets of Marta. Even the children make their own fontane, their little floats. This is a gorgeous one here with flowers. And these are beautiful photos by that talented photographer, Patrick Nicholas. Thank you, Patrick. Look at the boat with the ciambelle, the typical sweet of the day. These are villani, peasant farmers, shepherds on their fontana. They're all called fontane. This is a baker. There is IHS on that one. That'll be a host. This is a group of villani, farmers. The women throw the flowers out the window. No women participate in the procession. This is another one of the fontane. Wine pouring out of the vase here. He's offering us cheese from one of the floats. This is near Lake Bolsena. They're going to be heading up the mountain to the church, Santissima Madonna del Monte. What passion. These are the fishermen. This is a fisherman's fontana. Hats off to the Madonna, so they'll be shouting "E viva Maria," etc. And here they're leaving the town of Marta and going up to the church, La Madonna del Monte. And you can see that on every one of these floats called fontani, there's an image of the Madonna. Fishermen here. And there's the host with IHS, Jesus Hominum Salvatorum. Women throwing flowers out the window, the band's playing, the priest is blessing everyone. In a farm cart here. And going up the mountain again. And the MM is Viva Maria, Long Live Mary. You can see on the flags. These are fishermen here with their nets and their fisherman's hat and they wear boots. These are called the villani. These are farmers with sheaves of wheat. And they're singing to her songs dedicated to the Virgin. The band plays through the town. They're taking off their hats. Viva Maria, viva il Santo Sacramento, viva la Madonna. Fishermen here near the waterfront. This is a float or a fontana of the fishermen. This is the decoration of the church of La Madonna al Monte. And there is her image. And coming through the back streets, the young children, I think I showed you that one. And this is hats off to the Virgin. Now, I received this video from Patrick about 2 hours ago. And he set it to the music of Verdi. And I called and asked him why. And he said there was so much wind when I shot it. Let's see. It should be able to. Here we go. The Barabasa. See, he was there on this very windy day. So he chose this music to cover up the noise of the wind. You can see the joy of the people. Fishermen. Hats off to the Madonna, Viva Maria. There's the farmers, the Villani. Look at that. Look at that one. Crown. Queen of Heaven. You can hear the wind. And it's too bad you can't hear them shouting Viva Maria, but Pastor told me there was too much wind. Viva Maria! Viva la Madonna! That's extraordinary. And young and old and teenagers and kids. The young with the elderly, which is wonderful about these festivals, all of them in Italy. The uniting of the age groups and the professions. You've got here doctors and lawyers with farmers and plumbers and butchers and bakers. It's wonderful. Look at this guy. Time for a little bit of vino. And that's his website, prometetrusca.com. And so thank you for coming along. And I'd like to know who's going to join me next May 14th in Marta. May we see each other soon in Italy. So thank you.